let's see how you can authenticate to Azure using GitHub Actions in this video and using an Azure Service Principal. I'll tell you everything that you need to know to create an Azure Service Principal that can authenticate to Azure and make operations that will be useful for you to run GitHub Actions. Okay, so we have here a bare bones GitHub repository. It doesn't have anything. What we want to do is we want to create a GitHub action, a workflow that will allow me to authenticate towards Azure. Now, you can definitely create one that is bare bones and start from scratch. So if I click here, actions, you can set up a workflow yourself, or like use the simple workflow, which is scaffolding for basic YAML that will have everything you need. However, what we're going to be using today is if you go to the marketplace, over here is github.com/marketplace, you can say Azure CLI and then hit submit, and then you'll see that there's an Azure CLI action, and Azure actually what we want to do is Azure login, which will allow you to use the Azure CLI. So these officially supported GitHub Action will allow you to get authenticated to Azure and use the Azure CLI. And the way you do that is using these right here. So the one thing that you will need is to set these Azure credentials. The Azure credentials require some special options, and we'll see what those are. How about we copy paste this thing right here, and we'll put it in our action here. I'm going to say set the workflow yourself, and instead of doing all of these, I am going to just paste these from the marketplace. So it's going to do the Azure login, and the credentials is going to be Azure credentials. It's going to list all of the applications that I have running. And I don't think I have anything running right now, but this should run and work. Now I'll need to get the Azure credentials secret going. All right, so let's edit this file, and instead of on push, I don't want to start committing files and do things here on push. I want to trigger these manually. So I'm going to say workflow _ dispatch and then colon, a colon like that. And that will allow me to trigger these manually. So I'm going to commit these. I'm going to say allow manual trigger. I'm going to commit that again, and perfect. Okay, so now this is not going to run. I have to trigger it, but like I need to set these Azure credentials. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to go to my terminal, and the terminal, I am going to create a service principal. So I'm going to create one temporarily, and just so you know, you have to do AZ login, which is the way you can authenticate. I've already done that, so I've logged in, and what I'm going to do is AZ AD SP. So AD stands for Active Directory, SP for Service Principal, and I'm going to do create for RBAC, and I'm going to say -- name. We need to name our Service Principal, which is kind of like a special account. I'm going to say temp, and then role. You can actually select any role that you want for effects of this specific example. I'm going to use contributor. So that's role contributor. I'm going to be using here a specific scope that has my subscription ID already. I've put that subscription ID in a variable, so I'm going to paste this here. And what we have here is scopes / subscriptions, right? And then /$, which is my Azure subscription ID. So this is a shell variable that has my ID. Like I've already said that. And here is the specific thing that you need to know when creating a service principal for GitHub Actions. Use the -- SDK auth. Now you will get a deprecation warning. I'm going to hit return. So the output that is going to come from that command is going to be similar to this. So you'll have this client ID, client secret, the subscription ID, everything that is coming from your service principal that will allow you to get that going. All right, so we're here back in the GitHub Action. or GitHub repository, I'm going to create this Azure credentials secret. The way you do that is you go to settings, which is hidden here, settings right there. I'm going to scroll all the way down. I'm going to go to secrets. I'm going to click there. I'm going to click actions, and then I'm going to create a new repository secret. Now, if you remember, I'm going to open up a new tab here so that you can see. If you remember, the variable that I want, I'm going to create here, is Azure _ credentials. You must be sure that you have that right, otherwise you're going to get into problems. Back here, this is going to be Azure credentials. And what I'm going to paste here is that JSON value. Now, some of those values are secret, so you have to be careful who has access to those. So I'm going to paste these and add the secret. Okay, so I've clicked on add the secret. The secret is there. You can see here is Azure _ credentials. And so now we're ready to run this action and see what happens. So if I go here to actions again, this has failed 7 minutes ago because it was set to push. When I created that commit and push to main, what happened was that it triggered, but now it's not going to trigger because I set it to put it manually. So I'm going to select the workflow, Azure login sample, and I'm going to run the workflow and say, yes, I want to run the workflow from main. It's running the workflow. It will take a second to appear here. There's always kind of like this a buffer of a few seconds. I click here, and now it's running, and we should be able to authenticate now that this has now that this is talking to Azure. So perfect. So you can see here I was able to log in. I was able to log in using my credentials, and you can see here that this thing ran. Nothing is running. I don't have any service running, but you can see it's using AZ. So it managed to log in with that Service Principal and was able to run a query. So perfect. This is very good, and this is exactly how you would set some GitHub Actions to work with Azure, to authenticate with Azure with a specific Service Principal that has the role, that has the permissions, the scope that you need in order to make some changes or even read some resources from Azure directly.